welcome back. So you've probably seen this poster floating around from the new show called Cuties coming onto Netflix on the 9th of September. It is not a Netflix original, and it comes after winning awards in France actually, called Mignon over there. And it isn't about what the poster seems to depict it is. Well, not quite anyway, as Netflix has apologized for its promotional poster and changed it to what we've seen now. But after being released in French cinemas and garnering the awards, then you might be questioning, well, hey, French just a load of pedophiles, given what we're seeing here? Well, no, or at least that's not why the awards were given. Instead, the plot of the story is to try and show the over-sexualization of young girls in social media and just media across the board, really. It can happen for young boys in drag as well, as I'm sure we all remember those stories. And then it comes down to parental custody and the story gets even worse. But ignoring that, and also that this story from the reporting here, and I haven't seen it yet because I don't speak French, it is not the 9th of September, doesn't seem to touch on things like Drag Queen Story Hour, which would then be teaching children even more about sex, and that's what the LGBT community is trying to do, and that's not being touched on either, that the idea is to inculcate children in normalizing all different types of sex, many different types of sex and sexual acts, and including sexual depravity as well. That's not what the story decides to touch on. It tries to go from a more social media route in order to say, you're a bad person, instead of saying, maybe there are some communities we need to look into. But nonetheless, it does at the very least point out the pressure that young girls seem to be feeling in seeing what successful women are doing. And instead of having the role models within their family home, they then go to look out to what other women are doing and then copying that instead. And before they even know what they're doing, they're then doing things that are overly sexualized that they're not aware of because of their naivety and innocence, and then are rewarded for that, and hence go down that route even more. And obviously they're showing this as a multicultural or diverse ethnic issue as well. And then you've got to wonder, well, who's really helping that along, given the chat that Joe Biden decided to have first was with Cardi B, and we all know the fallout from her latest music video, the WAP. So, with that in mind, the story being portrayed is actually, of course, in favor of the people who are going against the poster, as the creator did as well. Because, of course, the whole point is to say, this is not what should be happening, and we're trying to focus on the struggles being faced without making it political so that it isn't censored and can then be shown, but in order to make people more aware of it, to then look into why this is happening, and then, of course, they can get political, and there are many avenues that they can take in order to find out what is really happening. So, as much as I might wish to lambast the creator to say, well, do you want to actually get into the root causes of this? She may be thinking that she can't, otherwise this content will never get out in the first place. So if you bring it in from the victim narrative, then the left will lap that up and hence promote it without realizing that if people then do their own research as to why this is happening in the first place, they'll then realize that it's actually going against them. And they're being a useful idiot, if you will, but actually against themselves instead of for themselves. So, getting into it. So, the award-winning drama follows an 11-year-old who joins a dance group. Its maker says it is meant to tackle the issue of sexualization of young girls. Netflix said it was deeply sorry for the inappropriate artwork. The streaming giant also said the original poster was not an accurate representation of the film. The image, together with the movie's name and suggestive dance sequences, initially triggered an online outrage. A petition claiming it sexualizes an 11-year-old for the viewing pleasure of pedophiles attracted 25,000 signatures in less than 24 hours. But director Maimona Doucouré has expressed that the story aims to highlight how social media pushes girls to mimic sexualized imagery without fully understanding what lies behind it or the dangers involved. And I think from the Jeffrey Epstein fallout as well, that's definitely been shown. And one of Joe Rogan's latest podcasts with Nikki Glaser also lightly touches upon this, but for 18-year-old girls, or women as they just about are, as far as porn is concerned, that before your mid-20s, before your frontal lobe is developed, before you can understand future consequences, you're going to make decisions that you'll later regret. And therefore, being encouraged to go into these particular endeavours, that if somebody steps through to go on the casting couch, then they're going to, of course, be encouraged to do it because it's profit for the business owners in the porn industry. And if they see that the girl in front of them seems to be enjoying it as well, then it's a win-win. There's nothing negative there whatsoever. But later on, if the woman in question wasn't aware of the consequences of what she was doing, she will later regret that, and most likely then become cynical with the society which suggested that it was okay. And that's the point that they're trying to raise. And that's even with adults. So then when it comes to children, particularly prepubescent children, which is what makes it paedophilia instead of pedestry, then of course they don't know what they're doing. Of course they haven't even had those urges to understand what it could possibly mean. So of course they don't understand why it's popular. They just see something that is popular and therefore copy it. So if you think of all the problems that an 18-year-old would have, but then you subtract 7 years, then of course it makes it a whole lot worse. It's difficult enough, coming of age, to know what you should be doing, but then for somebody who hasn't even gone into high school yet, it's impossible. So as they say, without fully understanding what lies behind it or the dangers involved, I think it's without understanding it at all. Really, I think fully understanding is being optimistic. So she said she decided to explore the topic after being shocked at seeing a group of girls aged at around 11 dancing in a sensual way and revealing clothes. I saw that some very young girls were followed by 400,000 people on social media, and I tried to understand why. There were no particular reasons beside the fact that they posted sexy, or at least revealing pictures. That is what brought them this fame. Today, the sexier and the more objectified a woman is, the more value she is in the eyes of social media. And when you're 11, you don't really understand all these mechanisms, but you tend to mimic, to do the same thing as others in order to get a similar result. I think it is urgent that we talk about it, that a debate be had on the subject. And that's a very shallow surface reading, of course, as we know, that it isn't necessarily true in terms of, sure, a woman has good looks, and more people care about how good the woman looks than the man looks, and the woman wants a man who earns more, is more intelligent, is taller, is stronger. The only thing that she's okay being better at than the man is good looks, in which case that is all the man can go on, is good looks, because the woman wants the man to exceed in every other aspect. Of course, that isn't to say that good looks with men aren't objectified as well, or admired. Of course they are. Of course they are. You don't need to do much digging in to find information about that. But on the flip side, if there's a woman who has put her brain into action more so than her body, and is probably later in life because of how much time it takes to get there, instead of just a few months at the gym and a diet in order to look good, and yes, it can be done in under a year, then of course you've got that trade-off between, do I want to be famous in a few decades, or do I want to be famous within a year? And it's easier and quicker to go for a year instead of a few decades. And then that is why this happens. Bear in mind that the women, the adult women who are participating, are doing so fully consenting as well. Again, maybe they don't fully understand. But then it comes down to female role models, and where are they coming from? So, the show itself follows 11-year-old Amy from Senegal, who is torn between her family's traditional conservative lifestyle and the escape offered by a free-spirited neighbour Angelica and her dance gang. It earned Franco-Senegalese filmmaker Decour the World Cinema Dramatic Directing Award at this year's Sundance Film Festival. It's just been released in French cinemas under its original name Mignon. It is not a Netflix original and would arrive on the platform next month. Many people on social media criticised the depictions, as you would expect. And it is fun to see then, I think, what would be most aptly characterised as then a sex-negative feminist mentioning these things, because, of course, that puts the left between a rock and a hard place to say, well, do we empower the women to be individuals and then being more than their body? But then, are we then saying that sex work is bad and we shouldn't be teaching children about this, but then we can't teach them about the LGBT community, in which case we're doing them a disservice. And they can't decide which oppressed group to pick. So, good job on that, and it will just be the left eating their own. So, well done, whether you meant to or not. But it is particularly showing to see it's a traditional conservative lifestyle that is hence being upheld and saying that that's a good thing compared to the free-spirited neighbour, and I wish they put liberal in there, which is then being the bad thing. And it goes to show that, yes, you do actually need a balance of each, that the eagle can only fly with both wings strong. And that's the point. That you need to understand the consequences of your actions, what the future holds for you, but at the same time understand that some risks are worth taking, and you've got to straddle the line. The older way is, of course, yin and yang, saying balance between order and chaos. Because with order, things tend to break down because they become stagnant, and there aren't any new innovations, can't keep up. Whereas in chaos, then you spread yourself too thin, and you run out of resources, and you can't keep yourself going. There have been other reviews which have been more critical of the film itself, in terms of the cinematography and, how to say, captivating but structurally shaky, and so on. But obviously that's not the main focus of why this has drawn attention. But she's done okay for herself, as Dakota's other awards include the inaugural Academy Gold Fellowship Award for Women. Because they need their own award, because they can't compete with men, don't you know? They clearly need their own award. Good job. Given by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the body behind the Oscars last year. According to Variety, the accolade came with a $22,000 or £16,600 grant to help finish Cuties. And there's definite irony in that. For her to try and say, women are more than their bodies, we shouldn't be thought of as lesser than men, and our minds are just as good. Cool, here's an award which can only be accepted by women because we can't trust you to compete at the same level as men. Great. Do you realise what you've done? But I'm sure she'll gladly accept it and go, well, at least it's something. At least it's something. As we saw with the Spanish basketball team in the Special Olympics. Almost 2 decades ago now. That none of them would actually qualify, and they just fudged their tests. Because gold in that was at least a gold, even if they couldn't really compete in the actual Olympics. I think that's the same thought process that goes in here. But, as always, let me know what you guys think down below. If this will actually have the impact that she hopes it will, or if it will just drive apart her own oppressional hierarchy, and therefore she'll try and pivot to then being a black woman as well, or a woman of colour, and not just a woman when the LGBTQ community come at her and the left try and rip themselves apart that way. Or do you think then she might move over to a more conservative way and say, well, yeah, women are women, we're individuals. Why can't we all be individuals? Let's embrace our own strengths and make the most of it so that we can choose freedom and live our own lives. Let me know. And as always, until next time, have a good one.